Every network called it a routine cancellation. The backstage footage tells a completely different story. Hanks's hand is already on Kimmel's desk, flat. Still, the knuckles aren't white, not yet, but the tendons running from his wrist are visible, and the camera on the floor catches them in a medium-close shot that nobody in the production booth chooses to cut away from. Across the desk, Kimmel is holding a single sheet of paper at its center, pinched between two fingers, letting it face the studio audience. 11 rows back, a woman presses the heel of her palm against her sternum, like a person checking whether their own heart has kept pace with what they just heard. But to understand how two men who have never shared a television desk before arrived at this moment, at this particular piece of paper, on this particular night, you have to go back to the morning the letter arrived. The Presidential Arts Commission sends its communications on formal letterhead. The date on the letter that arrives at the Tom Hanks Representation Office is a Tuesday. By that evening, 3 members of the Commission's advisory board have quietly requested their names be removed from the organizational roster. By Thursday, 2 of those requests are denied in writing. The letter itself is 3 paragraphs. The third paragraph contains a phrase, 7 words, that one entertainment attorney who reads it describes later as language she has seen used in punitive contexts, not administrative ones. She says this on camera, on Kimmel's stage, and she says it without raising her voice. The morning of the broadcast, Kimmel's production team moves the lighting rigs. Standard configuration for the desk segment places the guest's face in a warmer fill from the left. Tonight, the key lights come from directly above, clinical, shadowless, the kind of lighting used in documentary interviews when the subject's expression is the entire story. A floor director who has worked the show for 8 years notices the repositioned rigs when he arrives for the afternoon walkthrough and asks the lighting supervisor about them. The supervisor says simply, "Tonight's different." The floor director doesn't ask again. Kimmel is already at the desk when the cameras go live. Tom Hanks walks through the curtain and the audience stands, not because a cue card tells them to, but because the room decides to, spontaneously, the way rooms sometimes do when someone enters who has spent 30 years earning something that can't be entirely named. Hanks smiles. It is not the smile from the movies. It is smaller, more careful, belonging to a person who has been carrying something for several weeks and has chosen tonight to set it down in public. He reaches the desk. He shakes Kimmel's hand. He sits. He does not look at the audience for a long moment. He looks at the desk surface. Then he looks at Kimmel, and what passes between them is the kind of look that belongs to people who have already had the longer version of this conversation in a room without cameras. Then the curtain at the back of the stage opens a second time. Donald Trump enters from the opposite wing. The walk is the walk. Deliberate, heavy, each step a claim. He adjusts his jacket at the lapels before fully crossing into the stage lighting, a preparatory gesture, calibrating. His body takes the second guest chair and spreads into it with the practiced authority of a man who considers the physical dimensions of any room he enters to be negotiable in his favor. His eyes move first to the audience, then to Kimmel, and finally, last and briefly, to Hanks. The eye contact with Hanks lasts less than a second. Trump looks away first. "Jimmy," he says before Kimmel can open, "I want to say, the audience obviously knows how to pick him tonight." He gestures broadly at himself and Hanks together, as if they are a matched set he assembled. A man in the second row watches this gesture with an expression that doesn't change. The ratings attack comes early. Trump cites his own audience figures for an event he appeared at the previous month. He describes them as historic. He describes Kimmel's viewership trends using the word concerning, in a tone that suggests sympathy rather than hostility, which is somehow worse. He doesn't look at Hanks during this section. He addresses it to Kimmel, but the geometry of the desk means Hanks is receiving it whether Trump looks at him or not. The relevance attack involves the entertainment industry generally. He describes it as a closed circuit, people awarding each other for agreeing with each other, insulated from the real preferences of the real American public. He uses the word elite 4 times in 90 seconds. He uses the word authentic once in a sentence about himself. 2 people in the 6th row exchange a glance. The personal dimension arrives when Trump references the award directly. He describes the Presidential Arts Medal as a serious honor, the most serious, he says, and argues that its credibility depends on the rigor of its selection. He says rigor requires honesty. He says honesty sometimes requires difficult decisions. He does not say the word cancel. He says redirect. He says recalibrate. He speaks about this for 4 minutes, and Hanks does not speak, and Kimmel does not speak, and the silence coming from both men at once is a different silence than either would produce alone. It has mass. Trump's dismissal is the last note. He says the people who are upset about the decision are, predictably, clearly the people who benefit from the system the decision disrupts. He says disruption is uncomfortable. He says discomfort is not injustice. He opens his hands on the armrests. He waits. Kimmel looks at his desk surface for 2 seconds. His eyes come up. His voice, when it arrives, drops lower than his on-air register. Not louder, not sharper, simply closer to something without performance in it. You keep talking about power, but power doesn't usually need this much defending. The studio goes quiet the way a room goes quiet when a window opens in winter. The change is immediate and the temperature drops before anyone has consciously noticed the source. Trump's jaw tightens. Hanks looks at the desk again. Kimmel reaches under it. The screen behind the desk activates. The clip that appears is from a White House press briefing from 11 months earlier. Routine, administrative, 20 seconds of tape in which a spokesperson references the Presidential Arts Commission's review process and describes it as independent, merit-based, and insulated from political input. The clip ends. Kimmel lets it sit. The letter sent to Mr. Hanks's representation describes the cancellation as originating from a directive reviewed by the Office of the President. That's not independence, that's infrastructure. The anchor word arrives on its first use without emphasis. A woman in the front row straightens slightly in her seat. Trump says the clip is selective, says every administration reviews commission outputs, says the directive word is a standard term in procedural communication. Kimmel places a second document beside the first, the actual text of the directive, certified copy, the office designation printed clearly in the header. He places it on the desk and leaves it there. Now the dual timeline surfaces fully. While Kimmel holds the desks present, Tom Hanks speaks for the first time. Not loudly, not dramatically, in the measured and specific voice of a man who memorizes things carefully. He describes a timeline, not a political timeline, a personal one. He describes the morning of the phone call, the language used by the representative who delivered the notification, the specific phrase, "The honor has been administratively redirected," that he sat with for 3 hours before calling his attorney. He describes the attorney reading the letter and identifying the 7-word phrase in the third paragraph as punitive rather than administrative. He says this factually, the way he might describe a scene in a film he once shot. Not his feelings about it, but what happened. A production assistant near the monitor bank later says the control room was completely silent during Hanks's testimony. Not because nothing was happening, because they were all listening the same way. Trump says the letter was procedural, routine, that characterizing it as punitive requires a deliberate misreading. Hanks looks at Trump for the first time directly. He doesn't raise his voice. "I've played a lot of powerful men over the years," Hanks says. "The real ones never had to explain themselves this much." A single man in the fourth row exhales audibly. Nobody around him moves. Then Kimmel reaches under the desk again. The folder this time is thicker. He places it between himself and Hanks, opens it, and turns the first document toward the camera. It is an internal communication chain, official headers, official timestamps, running between 2 offices within the commission structure over a 14-day period. The chain begins with a standard merit review of the Hanks nomination. It ends with a 1-line directive that arrives from outside the commission's internal chain of command. The origin address on the final directive is not a commission office. Trump says the documents are fabricated. His voice carries the shape of the claim. But the hands, which have been resting wide on the armrests, have moved to his thighs. He says the production source is a known opposition operation. Kimmel produces the certification from a second independent verification source and places it on top of the folder without comment. A door at the rear of the stage opens. The man who enters is wearing a gray suit and the expression of someone who prepared for this walk the same way a long-distance runner prepares for the last mile. Not with energy, but with resolve. He identifies himself as a former senior coordinator within the Presidential Arts Commission, specifically assigned to the review process during the 14-day window visible in the document chain on Kimmel's desk. His testimony is clean and procedural. He walks through the chain chronologically. He names the date the external directive arrived. He names the designation code it carried, which matches the designation visible in the folder. He identifies the office of origin, which matches the header on the document. He doesn't characterize, he sequences. Before Trump can speak, the coordinator says, "That belief, that the process would correct itself, that the internal structure would hold against external pressure, that belief cost me more than any lawsuit ever could have." Trump attacks immediately. Political operative, disgruntled, coordinated hit. The coordinator absorbs it in complete stillness, the way objects in a room absorb sound without producing it. He says, "I've said what I came to say." He walks back through the door. Nobody expected what opened next. The second door, stage left, near the monitor station, admits a woman in her mid-40s, former legal liaison within the Commission's executive office. She holds a lanyard in her left hand, the Commission's official ID still attached to it, her fingers wrapped around it the way someone holds a thing they've carried for a long time and are finally setting down. She stops at the edge of the full lighting area. She identifies herself. She identifies her role. She identifies the specific NDA she was required to sign as a condition of her continued employment. A document that referenced by name the type of communication now sitting open on Kimmel's desk. When she describes signing it, her voice changes register. It doesn't break, but it alters. The way light alters when it moves from one medium into another. Her throat moves visibly before the next sentence. A tear traces her left cheek without being acknowledged or wiped. Her fingers on the lanyard press harder. Trump rises from the guest chair. Not fully, halfway. His voice comes out loud enough to move the front row audience backward by a centimeter. You signed that agreement. You made a commitment. You're breaking a legal document. The woman looks at him steadily for 3 seconds. Her voice, when it arrives, is the quietest sound in the room. I stayed quiet because I was afraid, but I was more afraid of what it meant if I never spoke. The applause that follows doesn't start with everyone. It starts with one person in the 7th row, hands coming together, slowly, deliberately, the sound of someone who has been waiting for permission to respond and has just received it. Another person joins. Then a row. The sound moves through the studio in measured waves, building not to a roar, but to something with more weight than a roar. The deliberate, collective sound of a room that has been given something true and is acknowledging it the only way available to them. Kimmel watches Trump. Hanks watches Trump. The screen behind them splits. On the left side, the domestic directive chain. The 14 days, the external instruction, the origin address. On the right side, a set of communications obtained from an overseas media rights coordination company that had been contracted by a related organization during the same period. The overseas communications reference award and recognition suppression protocols in 3 separate exchanges. The dates align with the directive window on the left side with precision. Trump says the foreign documents are illegal material obtained through hostile foreign actors. His breathing is audible now, not ragged, but present, visible at the collar in a way it wasn't 40 minutes ago. His hands have left his thighs and found the armrests again, but they are not spreading across them. They are gripping. His eyes move between the screen and the folder and Hanks and Kimmel and the door through which the second witness exited, finding nothing to settle on. His posture has narrowed since he first sat down. The territorial spread of the opening hour replaced with something that occupies less space and knows it. He says this is political persecution. His voice pitches slightly at the top of the sentence. A fractional crack caught clearly on the boom. He says they planned this from the beginning. He says he has survived things that would have ended every other person in this room. His jaw locks. He wipes the back of his hand across his lower face. At the hairline, under the forensic brightness of the repositioned key lights, a shine appears that belongs to private rooms and private moments, not studio cameras. The verbal collapse follows its own progression, from denial to accusation to procedural complaint to empty bravado. Each stage shorter than the last, like a structure losing floors. Kimmel lets each stage complete before speaking. Then he leans forward, barely, just slightly, and his voice arrives at its quietest point of the entire broadcast. If everything I've shown tonight is a lie, then show the truth. Not with insults, with evidence. Trump opens his mouth. The room waits. Tom Hanks looks at his hands. A camera operator on the studio floor stares through her viewfinder at Trump's face and does not blink for 4 seconds. Trump closes his mouth. The infrastructure of the evening, the certitude he carried through the curtain, the ratings assertions, the relevance lectures, the punishing procedural language, is fully visible now for what it was. Not authority. The appearance of authority, constructed carefully and maintained at volume. Infrastructure built to keep something standing that should have been examined long before tonight. The infrastructure is still standing, but everyone in the room can see through it now, and seeing through it is the same as watching it fall. Trump stands. He moves toward the backstage curtain without addressing Kimmel, without addressing Hanks, without addressing the audience. His pace is not a walk. It's a controlled urgency that belongs to people who need to be somewhere else and have stopped pretending they don't. His aide steps forward to intercept him in the corridor, and Trump moves past him. A camera in the backstage feed captures the aide looking down at his phone, then back at the empty corridor, and then down at his phone again, with the expression of someone whose instructions have stopped applying to the situation in front of them. Tom Hanks remains at the desk. He looks at the documents for a moment. Then he looks at Kimmel. He says nothing. The expression on his face, the one the cameras hold for 11 seconds before going to commercial, is not triumph. It is the expression of someone who has been waiting for a room full of people to see something he has seen alone for a long time, and has finally, tonight, not had to see it by himself. The clip of the NDA witness's final line is live on 3 platforms within 7 minutes of broadcast. Within 22 minutes, the full confrontation has been segmented into 11 independent pieces spreading at different velocities. The document split screen, domestic and foreign communications side by side, reaches 4 million views before the West Coast broadcast finishes. People who have never watched late-night television are sharing it with one caption: "How did nobody know about this before tonight?" Networks cut in. Anchors reconstruct the directive timeline using their own graphics teams, their own color systems, arriving at the same alignment. One anchor replays Kimmel's second use of the word infrastructure from the foreign files section and allows it to sit in broadcast air for 8 seconds without commentary. A producer later says the silence was editorial. Some words earn the space they occupy. Trump's response begins at 12:03 a.m. 7 posts over 94 minutes. The first is 1 sentence and controlled. By the third, the capitalization has escaped the subject lines. By the sixth, sentence structure has given way to repetition and accumulation. By the seventh, the post is 3 times the length of any factual counter-argument it could contain. Each post is screenshot shared within seconds, placed beside the corresponding evidence layer from the broadcast. The calibrated voice, the unraveling voice, the juxtaposition does all the work that commentary would diminish. At 2:47 a.m. Eastern, a network news desk receives an encrypted communication from a source identifying themselves as a legal professional formerly attached to the overseas media rights company, visible in the right side split screen. No name, no photograph, just the company's letterhead, verified by the network against public registry records within 38 minutes. The communication confirms the existence of the protocol exchanges. It confirms the dates. It states in 1 sentence that is read on 4 morning broadcasts: "Continued professional silence on this matter has become indistinguishable from participation." The story doesn't resolve. It persists. Weeks later, people are still cross-referencing the directive chain against other commission decisions from the same period, looking for the pattern the 2 documents suggest. Still waiting for an official counterfiling, a formal denial addressing the specific documents rather than the people who produced them. The counterfiling hasn't arrived. Some questions don't get answered quickly. They get answered slowly, by accumulation, by the weight of everything that never arrives to disprove them. The people who subscribe to this channel don't come for drama. They come for the moments nobody else is willing to show. Join them, subscribe, turn on notifications. The next truth is already on the table.